So that was so relationship with it's very contentious in Nigerian space. So the what are we observed to? Yeah, money. We say context of this in Nigeria.
I guess that's not necessarily the focus of my research.
So many unusual story. I learned to know when you go to downstairs.
I feel like that would be interesting. Very, yes. What would be the format? What would be the format? So I think we're doing the
I think that would be something at the chair, yes.
I'll be ready
Good afternoon. Those about, people from units. Can you hear us, please? Communities. You are.
That's so interesting. I'll go say a lot,
Good afternoon, can you hear us, please?
I'll go say a lot for.
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. The session will be starting very soon. Sessions are arriving.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You got my answer.
Would you? Ready? Professor Rupert. Hi, Professor Rupert. Hi, Professor Nishima. Can you operate please? Professor Nishima, please can you unmute?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Sorry. Yes, good afternoon, sir. I was just hoping that others will join us. We have just one of the panelists here. Yes.
Okay.
Or do we have them in the house?
So we have the finalist here, I mean the author here, and then we have Professor Daniela and
Agbala Jobi. Yes.
So far we have 2 persons and we are expecting 4 persons.
I can hear you clearly.
We're expecting 4 persons.
Yes.
4 persons.
So do you want us to start?
It's your call, ma'am. It's your call. But persons are also coming in.
Okay.
So we will wait for one. But it's your
Okay,
call.
let's wait for like 5 minutes. If we don't have them, then we'll start. All right. Hi, Portia.
It's funny. Yeah. But I think really is vegetarian.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Am
Thanks for the good book. Oh, the audio is so bad.
the order? The audio. Can we turn off the fans so there is less background noise?
Okay.
What if now? Can you hear me if I speak now?
Yes, I can hear you clearly now.
Okay, so we'll keep it here whilst I'm speaking.
I can hear you clearly, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for coming around and thanks for the book. So let's just hold on for like 4 minutes and see if others join us. If not, we'll carry on. All right. So thank you for your patience. one of the panelists is trying to log on. I think he didn't check his email for the personalized link. So he's trying to join. Well, Professor Balajabi.
Good afternoon, ma.
Yes, good afternoon, ma.
Balajabi.
Nice
You have
to
asked
see
me,
you.
Professor, already. Good to see
Abi,
you.
oh,
Thank
Shebi, you are HOD. So you are Professor HOD.
Hi, Damilola.
Yeah, welcome.
Hi,
Ma.
good afternoon, Portia. Thanks for giving us the privilege of reading your book. And thanks for, it's a privilege meeting you.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. We are already behind schedule. I don't know what's happening with the other panelists. We have
start?
one person, Professor Olaniyo is trying to join. So
Yeah.
I hope he's able to do that soon. I'm sure he wasn't aware of the personal link. So he joined on the other one and he's been there for more than 45 minutes. So
Should we start and then he can join us later?
Yes, so he will join us. All right, so thank you so much for to the LSA organizers for the privilege asking me to chair this panel. Okay, we are looking at the book by Portia Roelofs on engaging good governance in Nigeria, rethinking accountability and transparency in the 21st century. I read the book. I actually read the book and I enjoyed the book. I think it's a very good book of history. I hope we are able to get copies of the book for our students at the University of Ibadan. It's a very good book, but that's not for me to say yet. I think I should allow the panelists to let us know what they see in the book and what they think of the book. I think we have, if we are not having everybody, I don't know how we're going to do it, but ordinarily we're supposed to have 12 minutes for each of the panelists. So since Professor Balajobi is already here, so let's start with you. I'm sure others will join us.
Okay.
I have some things I'd like to say about the book, but when everyone has spoken, I'll say one or two things. So, Ma, you have the floor. Please let us have your thoughts, Professor Balajobi.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for this privilege. And thank LSA for inviting me to review the book. Yeah, Portia Roelofs' research lies at the intersection of development studies, African politics, and political theory. And looking at the book, Good Governance in Nigeria, Rethinking Accountability and Transparency in the 21st Century, our work brings a critical approach to questions of governance, democracy and accountability, and problematize the political economies that actually shape knowledge production in this field. Just like all our works, Good Governance in Nigeria is another uncommon elucidation and written book. It brings to clarity the thesis as stated in the title, which is the need to rethink good governance as a socially embedded activity, which was inspired by the call from the Nigerian political scientists, the need to rethink the good governance agenda. The book used major characters like Abdulaziz Areshekola Alao, Abiola Ajumobi, Adoke Adedibu, Rashid Ladoja, Peter Ayodele Fayose, and others, and emphasize on the epistemic, social, and material dimension of good governance as seen in Nigeria, especially from 1999 when we had the return to democracy as the basis of the analysis. This depicts her characteristics, brilliance, and analytical rigor in the way she presents the good governance agenda's technocrat vision of how to fix African politics, situating this vision in a longer epistocratic political tradition that emphasizes the knowledge-based epistemic dimension of governance in page 25. The author theorized, adopted the twin conception of neo-patrimonialism and good governance to form a conceptual framework on the challenges of African politics and what to do to make it better. Neo-patrimonialism has been adopted by other authors as a framework to study corruption in 17 African countries, where authors like Why have used the term as a discourse on the cause of state failure in Africa. While the likes of Lindbergh and the Castle also use the framework, but they see neo-patrimonialism rule as the primary institutional heritage of Africa. And under certain conditions, neo-patrimonial governance can be compatible with a growth-enhancing investment climate, respectively. Whereas our author reconceptualization of good governance actually challenges a long-held assumption of the World Bank and other international institutions, and others was based on some limitations she identified, which led to a more comprehensive analysis of how the state and political processes are socially embedded. She relied on inductive qualitative methodology using interviews, online news, as well as other informal ways of generating knowledge. She had privileged access to many institutions of Nigerian democracy, being a white researcher, which helped the data collection process. This methodological decision was dictated by the central question addressed in the book, namely, the desire to describe and theorize the ideas and practices which shape popular conception of good governance in southwestern Nigeria. This methodological decision was principally to analyze the main thesis of the work, which is to rethink good governance as a socially embedded activity that is accountable. This task she engaged is by examining empirically the political character of the likes of Abiola Ajumobi and his progressive conception of good governance. And now in an attempt to maintain popular support, adopted the Lagos model, which is a knowledge-based element of good governance, which promised enlightened leadership and material progress. This was against the Amala politics, which emphasized the mass distribution of food and close social connection between leaders and followers, which is a progressive versus a populist politics, as seen in the book. The method adopted allowed for new ways of thinking about good governance, using scholarly and donor pieces of literature on accountability and transparency with Yoruba concepts like Olaju and Amala politics. Is used to make generalizable claims about the need to attend to the epistemic and material and social dimension of governance. She explored the conflicting conception of accountability using ethnographic fieldwork in southwestern Nigeria and UK and Ghana. And that provided evidence and examples of a more socially embedded conception of accountability as accessibility. She used the principle agent model theory, because she believes that theory did not give a more holistic, although we believe that the theory did not give a more holistic exploration of the relationship between voters and politicians, but she still used it to explore accountability and accessibility to bridge the gap that she identified. And that gap is the power of communication as an intrinsically valuable part of accountability. She also explored the politics of competing conception of transparency, and her basis is drawn from African scholars' conceptualization of transparency as the citizens' right to know. She noted that there are various ways of conceptualizing transparency, which falls under two major academic camps. We have the camps of those who belong to the developmental studies perspective that sees transparency as a tool to promote accountability, while we have the second camp, the public administration in the global north, that sees transparency as contributing to trust in government. The author avers that principles of accountability, accessibility, and transparency in people help to make power more accountable by embedding them in social relations. This highly inspiring and timely book, Good Governance in Nigeria, Rethinking Accountability and Transparency, critically assess the state of governance in Nigeria, and provides a new viewpoint on the problems the country is currently facing, and actually suggests creative solutions for a better future. The book written is a must read for everybody looking to gain a thorough understanding of the intricate problems relating to Nigerian governance, by taking into account the enormous changes and advancements that have occurred in the 21st century. The author gave us, place Nigerian governance system, of course, starting by placing it in historical perspective. And that provides a very strong foundation for understanding the difficulties and opportunities that have evolved in Nigeria's governance system. And this she did by evaluating historical context and the current political, economic, and social realities that we're facing. And so it goes into foundational elements of sound government by highlighting how crucial accountability and transparency is, as I said. And she did this skillfully by examining the complex interrelationship between these two elements of how it affects how well the government and society as a whole operates. And so she makes a very strong case for the necessity of accountability and openness to promote confidence, to advance efficient public service delivery, and guarantee fair distribution of resources. This book's thorough study of the structural problems preventing good governance in Nigeria is one of the strongest points that I see. The complicated web of corruption, flimsy institutions, efficient legal system, and political favoritism that have contributed to governance issue is painstakingly examined. The author provides insightful explanation of the underlying causes of Nigeria's governance crisis through a thorough analysis of these elements. Additionally, the book offers a wide range of double fixes for promoting good governance in Nigeria, going beyond diagnosis. The author highlights the necessity of significant institutional reforms, the advancement of transparency through efficient accountability mechanism, the reinforcement of the rule of law, and the active involvement of citizens in the decision-making process. Each suggestion is backed up by concise and convincing justification, making them realistic and doable. The author's language is readable. I found it very interesting to read, and it successfully explains difficult governance issues to a wide range of readers. You don't need to think, to sit down and be looking for a dictionary to read the book and understand. The book avoids the overuse of jargons and use case studies and examples from real-world situations because she was on the field to demonstrate the important terms, making it simple for readers to relate to the subject. This openness is a crucial asset since it enables readers from different backgrounds to interact with the content and comprehend how governance affects Nigerians' trajectory for growth. Additionally, the book's importance goes beyond Nigerian boundaries. Although Nigeria's governance concern are the main focus, other development nations with comparable problems can benefit from the insights and lessons provided. The book offers a framework that can direct reform initiative in various circumstances and challenge users to rethink critically about governance. That's about good governance. Good governance in Nigeria, rethinking and transparency, as the book is in conclusion, is a crucial contribution to the conversation about governance in Nigeria. And because it provides a thorough examination of the problem the country is facing, and with useful suggestions for improvement. And not just especially for policymakers, for researchers, and anyone who is interested in comprehending and advancing good governance in Nigeria and elsewhere. We find this thought-provoking book to be an invaluable resource. It is a compelling argument for radical change and a moving illustration of how a well-functioning government may influence the course of a country. That is what I saw, and that's my contribution to this book. I hope you find I can share my prose with you if you want. Thank you very much.
Bangladesh, I think the network is bad over there. We can barely hear you.
Thank you very much. We already have or
Network issue. Oh, I think she's back.
network is running around. Okay, I was asking Portia if she has any comment to what Dr. Gbalajobi has said while we wait for Professor Laniyo.
She wants to know if you have a comment.
Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, maybe I'll just respond to that and also give a brief summary of the book for people in the room and online. Am I audible to the people in the room? Can you hear me? Okay. And
okay. Maybe before you do that, Portia, before you do that, yeah. Professor Laniyo is around now. So please let him just do his presentation.
Okay.
So
sure.
now,
Great.
since we are not many, so it will just... So Professor Laniyo. I think he's having problem with his network too. It's the day of network. So, well, he's trying to speak. I can see that, but something is wrong with his network. So, Portia, you can carry on. Portia, carry on.
All right. So thank you so much to the people who are online and the discussants, and also the people who are here in person. It's such an honor to have people read your book very closely and pay very good attention to it. And I was really impressed with Damalola's presentation. It is just a perfect summary of the book. So I really have to just show my appreciation for that. But let me maybe summarize the book. I try and do three main things. So the first is I tell an empirical story. And this empirical story is basically about what was happening in Lagos and Southwest Nigeria between 1999 and about 2009. And what we saw there was like a story of transformation. So in 1999, at the beginning of democracy, the return of democracy, Bola Tinubu, now president, inherits a very, very difficult situation in Lagos. It's so unsafe that the airport is shut because they can't guarantee that the passengers won't be robbed between the plane and the town. And this is indicative of a kind of wider urban crisis. And yet, within the two terms of his governorship, by 2007, he's turned the city around. It has the highest tax revenues in Nigeria, highest internally generated revenue. It streaks ahead in terms of public transportation, urban governance. And so what I do in the book is, first of all, I look at what is the nature of this transformation, and I look at it critically. And then I look at the debates that this prompted when the Lagos model was replicated in other states in Southwest Nigeria. For example, in 2011, 5 out of the 6 states of the Southwest zone have governors from the same political party as Tinubu, and they're coming from the Tinubu tradition. So I focus on Oyo State, which is where we have Ibadan, and it's Governor Abiola Ajimobi. And he also affects a transformation of Ibadan. Ibadan, before he came to power, was known as the most dangerous city in Nigeria. You could only sleep with one eye open because it was so unsafe. It also was the home of some figures of Nigerian politics who are seen as the epitome of Amala politics, this like corruption or patronage or patrimonialism. So I'm thinking people like Lamidi Adedibu, who also had many touts on the streets doing violence for him. He gave out food outside of his house. He had a big followership, but in many ways is the opposite of what we think of as good governance. So we also see a transformation in Ibadan. And I try and go deeper. I look at what are the policies, but also what are the intellectual and ideological underpinnings. And I trace it all the way back to Yoruba cultural nationalism. So people like Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who is the leader of the first he's the premier of the Western region under colonialism. He's a leader after independence. He founds the Action Group, which is the political party. He founds UPN, another political party. And they're all really continuing his kind of ideology. At the same time, what was happening in Lagos and the surrounding states won the applause of a lot of international observers, like USAID, DFID, donor organizations, the World Bank. What they did, they looked at Lagos and they looked at Ekiti and Oyo, all of these states in the southwest, and they noticed that a lot of things they've been pushing Nigeria to do at the federal level for like 20 years, suddenly Lagos state government, it was doing it, and it was doing it of its own volition. So what's interesting is you get this kind of convergence between a local political project run by Nigerian politicians and international ideas of what good governance means. And so what that allows you to do, it allows you to take the debates around the Lagos model. So people debating, is Fashola doing a good job? Is Ajimobi doing a good job? And use them as a way of critiquing or thinking about good governance as a wider set of ideas internationally. And so for anyone who is not familiar with the idea of good governance, it's something that came out of the World Bank after structural adjustment. So structural adjustment happened in the 1980s and the 1990s, and it said the problem with your economy is there's too much state intervention. You have to just bring in the market, privatize, liberalize, devalue currency. And instead, the good governance agenda said, actually, you need to focus on the quality of governance to improve your economy and improve development. So it's accountability and transparency. But what I argue in the book, so what is my argument? My argument is that actually, if you look at Nigerian politics and you look at what Nigerian politicians and voters do and what they talk about, you get an alternative account of good governance that nonetheless has things to teach the rest of the world. And these help explain some of the resistance to this like more international conception of good governance in places like Lagos, Oyo, and Ekiti. And you can think about that as not the standard account is that you have good governance and then you have corruption fights back. So you have the technocrats who are trying to take the high road, and then you have everyone else who's taking the low road, selling their votes, doing whatever. And my argument is actually that what we see in Nigeria, we see conflicting accounts of accountability. So something that you do to make yourself more accountable, maybe it has a backlash, some unintended consequence. And this is where I just want to thank Damilola. She really highlighted this well, because the two ideas that I pick out, I talk about an alternative conception of accountability as accessibility. So if you talk to Nigerian politicians and you say, how do you make yourself, how do you do good governance? They tend to say, be accessible. And what this means is like maintain spaces for direct communication with your constituents. Make sure you are open to have people come and talk to you, ask you questions, criticize what you're doing, whatever. However, the interesting thing is, if you look at political science, and all of the books and the articles that are written and what we talk about in conferences, we never talk about this idea of accountability as accessibility. So I take it as an example of something where Nigerians already have the vocabulary and the concepts that allow us to understand something about accountability more generally that the rest of political science hasn't yet been able to explain. And in my book, if you're interested in that more academic side, I explain why I think this is, because of the like intellectual development of liberal thought and ideas around good governance. I also talk about an idea of what does transparency mean? And so if you look at the standard approach, the World Bank or these technocrat politicians, they tend to think that transparency is about data. So you take a budget, you take federal allocation details, you take statistics and you put them online. And so transparency tends to mean like accounts or data or spreadsheets. And the interesting thing is that often the politicians in the Lagos model, they did this quite well. And yet people found it not more transparent, but less. So people would say things like, well, these are very smart people. They know how to make their numbers look good, but they're still taking money. Or they say maybe these connections they have to international organizations, maybe that allows them to look clean while still being corrupt. So we actually find that transparency in data doesn't always lead to more trust. It often leads to mistrust. And so when I thought about, okay, well, how do Nigerians do transparency, or what's an alternative model of transparency? I noticed that often it was more focused on people. So who are you connected to? Who are your loyalties to? Where are you from? Who is your godfather? If you get into power, what should I expect from you? It's about the transparency of social relations and the legibility of networks. So something I also found another tension is the Lagos model and good governance. It often meant that these politicians were forming international connections, which were not legible or understandable to people on ground. So, for example, one of the criticisms given to Dr. Kayode Fayemi from people in Ekiti State is like, he's always running away to Lagos. And the implication is like, who's he meeting there? What's he doing? What are they making him do? We don't know. Whereas if you stay and you connect with people in a way that's legible and you have transparency in people, it's an alternative vision of what it means to be transparent. So just to wrap up, because I know I've spoken for quite long, I want to talk a bit about methodology in a sense of what was I trying to do with my book. If you've ever taken maybe a course in African politics at university, you know it's often a very negative account. So they take the example of what people are doing in other climes, like in Western countries. They take it as the ideal. And then they compare Nigeria and they say, it doesn't match up. It has poor governance, bad leadership, whatever, whatever. And obviously there are problems, I'm not blind. But what we can do nonetheless is think about, are there things we can learn from Nigerian politics? Could Nigerian politics and political practice nonetheless be the source of theoretical innovation, rather than just somewhere to go to take our ideas and show that, oh, okay, it doesn't match our standards. So that was my effort, to go and do ethnographic research and then pull out some theories and show that there are actually things that Nigerians are very good at politically, where we could learn and maybe try and replicate it elsewhere. And that's through these conceptual innovation around accountability and transparency. And I think this was largely summarized by Damjola and her very astute observations, but I just wanted to make sure it's also clear to the audience who maybe haven't read the book yet. But let me hand back to the chair, Prof. Adeshina.
All right, thank you so much, Portia. Before we call on to people who want to ask questions, I just want to say one or two things about what I see in the book. As I said, I mean, it's a book of history. If some of the things I've never heard of them before, but I see at least you substantiated them with references and so on. So it was a very good production. And also how you juxtapose progressive vision with populist vision also is a very good point, because you link with the concept of Olaju, and also linked to Tinubu, to Ajimobi, and also the populist Lamidi Adedibu of Amala politics. And also you talked about godfathers and things like that. And also what I also find interesting is the fact that you were able to show us that most of the time you find out that even the masses that you think will be clamoring for accountability and transparency, they want to fall along the line of the populist vision, where they will say that, look, what we want is accessibility as against possibly performance. We want our leaders to be accessible to us. Like we have the case of Fayose against Fayemi. The people of Ekiti said, Fayose is always there. You see him in the buka with people eating. He's always on Okada and everything. So, and Fayose, people felt that it was too far off. He's always in a meeting. It's not always there to listen to people. So these are things that I see come out very well in the book, and the various roles that the godfathers in Oyo State played in Oyo State politics also came out strongly. Lamadeshina, Lamidi Adedibu, Arishekola Alao, and so on. So I see it's a very big package. It's a very good work. And I see Professor Laniyo is back online. Let's try and see if he will be able to speak. Professor Laniyo. Professor Laniyo. He's suffering from network. Yes, he's suffering from network. Okay, also, I'll just carry on. You also talked about transparency in terms of data, in terms of things that is visible output, in terms of people. You know, these are things that our politicians should actually look into. We just had a transition to a new government. So what do people want to see? And I see you try to say that the best mode is to have a mix of the two, like possibly what we may have with Seyi Makinde in Oyo State. You know, people thought that this second term is a myth in Oyo State, but Ajimobi was able to prove that it's possible to have a second term, and Seyi Makinde also has been able to bring that also to the fore. So we see the Lagos model of course, being homegrown, as they have said. Of course, some say it's the agenda of the international donors, but we see it bringing about governance reforms and things like that, and so on like that. So I think it's a very good book. Unfortunately, Professor Laniyo is not able to join us. But do we have questions from the room out there? Comments? You want to say something, Portia?
I just want to.
We cannot hear you. Okay.
If I just respond to a couple of the very insightful issues that you raised, and maybe just give a bit of background as well, because there were some things you said that I thought were so useful.
Okay.
So, like, first of all, I'm honored that you think it's a good history book, because I'm not a historian. I'm a political scientist.
You are not sensitive.
Is someone? I feel like there's came a sound out.
Sorry, it's not from me, for my children. Right.
No problem.
So carry on, please.
I'm a political scholar. I'm not a historian, and yet what I realized is it's impossible to tell the story of the current politics of the Fourth Republic without going into that history. So basically, in chapter 1, I try and trace the history of 2 different approaches to good governance in Yoruba land. One is this, maybe the more famous one, the more celebrated one, from, as you say, Obafemi Awolowo, who's like this progressive figure, very elitist, very, the government should be a tool to improve society, to work towards future visions, modernization. It should use abstract knowledge. It should be very exposed, very enlightened. And that has a long history, but alongside that long history, it's also a history of a kind of alternative, more populist, more conservative perspective that says, well, the role of the leader is to be close to the masses and to deliver benefits in the here and now. So to say, oh, you know, I'm going to make investments and you won't see the benefit for 10 years is a very progressive approach, kind of this like long-term vision. But there's also been this more conservative populist one, which is like, good leadership is about immediate economic benefits. So that's something I found useful from going into that history. And I just wanted to appreciate the number of Yoruba historians who were so helpful to my understanding. People like Olufemi Vaughan and his book, Nigerian Chiefs. It's really a fantastic volume, and I learned so much from that one. And then I also just wanted to touch on, the chair raised this issue of like the progressive visions, and the way in which the progressive visions informed the Lagos model and what the governors were doing, what Tinubu was doing. And I think this is actually quite a controversial claim. Because if you talk to people about Nigerian politics, the number one thing they'll tell you is there's no ideology, there's just chop. And so it was really important to me to try and uncover some of the ways that political ideas and ideology actually shape what is happening on the ground. They shape what the politicians are doing and they shape the conversation, which is quite difficult to prove because something that's so common is that people just switch between PDP, APC, whatever, like crossing the floor. And that makes it seem like these parties don't stand for anything. And yet what I think we see maybe at this more subnational level, especially in the Yoruba Southwest, is quite a clear vision that is driving the political agenda. And we see that in the links between maybe more like cultural, ethnic associations like Afenifere Renewal Group, and the political parties. So I think it's quite a good challenge. If someone says to you there's no ideology in Nigerian politics, be like, well, how do you then explain the Lagos model? So I thought it was an important thing that the chair picked up on. And then also the chair, I'm so glad that you noticed my argument about equity states, because it's really central for my book. And so equity states is also in the Southwest. And in 2014, it had like a test case of this progressive Lagos model, because one of the governors who was like the perfect incarnation of good governance came up for re-election. And you may have heard of him. He's called Dr. Kayode Fayemi. He has a PhD from King's College, my own college. He was part of civil society. He's really a technocrat. In the Yoruba phrase, we can say he's Omoluabi. You know, he's a very cultivated character. And he came up for re-election against someone who was like the polar opposite, Ayo Fayose, who's from PDP. He was governor before. He had various court cases hanging over his head for violence, corruption. He goes into the street dressed as Father Christmas and gives out rice. He invents the term stomach infrastructure. He says you cannot tar a road without tarring a stomach. And so in this 2014 Ekiti state gubernatorial election, we really see like a fight between two very, very different personalities. And guess what? Good governance loses. So Fayemi is not re-elected. It's widely known that there was probably a lot of vote buying and violence. However, even people within the APC at the time recognized that probably the popular opinion was with Fayose. So even though there were problems with the election, there was still a serious critique of Fayemi. And a lot of the book is trying to make sense of why that is. And some people said, well, it's just because Fayose gave out rice, you know, like the bag of rice with his face on it. I don't know if you've seen this. But I think if we push deeper, it's more to do with the idea of the social relations that the politician is able to cultivate. So, for example, there were some activists for and I draw on the work of Saeed Husseini in this, but there were activists for the APC who were meant to be backing Fayemi. And just days before the election, he comes and he gives them rice because he realizes that he's falling behind. And they take the money and they still vote for Fayose anyway, because they see the technocrat as being arrogant or inaccessible or aloof. So again, what I was trying to do in this book is understand, what do people mean when they say that a politician is arrogant? What do they mean when they say they are out of touch or that their office has gone to their head, which is a common critique of technocrats. And so this, I think, is where we see maybe the competition between different ideas of good governance. And then finally, Prof picked up on this idea, this interesting thing that we see in Oyo State in 2019. Shea Makinde comes to power, and his slogan is good governance, but with a human face. And so it's this idea that he's taking what Ajimobi did, but he's also adding in this more like people-oriented perspective, and he's trying to be more sensitive. So this isn't a judgment on Shea Makinde. I didn't study that era, but it's interesting that was how politicians were strategically positioning themselves. To say good governance on its own, this kind of rarefied technocratic ideal, isn't actually enough. So let me leave it there. I wonder if there are any other questions, or if the other discussant is back, or questions from the audience perhaps as well. But thank you.
Yeah, I think the network issue is so bad. Professor Laniyo has been going in and out, so he's not able to join us to discuss. So do we have questions from the LSA room there? Do we have questions, comments? I can't see any question on the Q&A here. So do we have any from the room?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, please, can someone help us to manage that?
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Doctor, for the wonderful insights that you have just given us right now. My question relates to what you mean by accessibility, right? And the danger of giving accessibility in an imbalanced way, right? During your field research and your interviews, did you get any sense that by politicians providing accessibility could be a double-edged sword, whereby providing one particular group more accessibility could lead to, let's say, a political backlash?
Can I just take that one, or should I take?
Any other question? Okay, yeah.
Thank you so much for the enlightening discussion. While you were presenting, you talked about Amala politics. I would like you to kindly elaborate on that. And what is the motivation for the concept of Amala politics? Thank you.
Wonderful. Sorry?
Yeah, please introduce yourself first.
Hi, my name is Nasser Mohammed. I'm a researcher at Oxford University.
Introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Hairat Bukola Yusuf. I'm into dance and choreography, and I'm a lecturer at the Bayero University, Kano. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Jingjing Liu. I'm an assistant professor of anthropology from McEwan University in Canada. My question is actually, so I saw you in the last session as well in the discussion about, I guess, that's kind of the social contract. And I was just wondering about, if you can elaborate on your decision to select political institutions as places of governance rather than, for example, households, as we heard from the last presentation, right? If every household is its own government, why locate governance to political institutions and not to, people, households, families, those associations that you also spoke of? Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much to all of the questions.
Okay, please, before you, Portia,
Yeah.
before you answer that question, there's a question online that is asking for the effect of this governance style on the populace. The person says the contribution so far has not touched on the effect of this governance style or format on the populace. Isn't that a better or more statistically verifiable means of gauging good governance? Does the book hinge on this? So the effect of these styles of governance on the populace is what this person is asking for.
Okay.
Okay, so add that to the questions you want to answer. Thank you.
I'll come back to that one. Okay, so thank you so much for the questions. So Nasir's question, I took it to be, so if a politician is accessible, that means like being open to communication and engaging with like different constituents. And isn't there a risk of imbalanced accessibility? So maybe you're open to engaging with and hearing the needs and the demands from one group of your constituents, but not everyone. And I think that's really common in politics. But first of all, I think in the book, I explore how can you institutionalize accessibility. And so, and that means like, how can you like write it into the rules or the conventions and the norms of government and the kind of the infrastructure of government. And so there's something else I think that Nigerian politicians basically invented, that demonstrates accessibility. So like nowhere else in the world have I seen the phone numbers of the officials and the like government workers who are responsible for a project listed on like a sign or a website next to it. So that's a really good sign, a really good way of working accessibility into like institutional norms in ways that are somewhat open and kind of universal. So that's one response. Another response is, I actually think that we need to be able to articulate what accessibility is so that we can notice its unbalanced and its unequal current ways of operating. And then we can critique it for what it is. And so in part of the book that I eventually took out, I tried to apply these concepts to British politics. And so it's an example from Britain that I used to kind of highlight this. So our former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, there was a scandal where it turned out he had accepted like hundreds of thousands of pounds to the Conservative Party for playing tennis with a very, very rich donor. And I took this as an example of accessibility, but only to the person who can pay for that access. And we actually know this about a lot of politicians. They are very accessible to people within their networks, other people like them, other people with money, other people who are head of companies, other people who went to elite schools, the old boys network of Eton, Harrow, Oxford, whatever. And so we can talk about that as a form of accessibility, and we can critique it on the basis that it's not widespread enough. And actually, there was something quite ironic. In response to this scandal with Boris Johnson getting money to play a tennis match, Nadeem Zahawi, who went on to be a minister in Boris Johnson's government and remains a very influential Conservative Party politician, when people were saying, doesn't this give unequal access to the Prime Minister? He said, well, anyone can buy a ticket to a Conservative fundraiser. So it's kind of ironic because he's accepting that you get something special by being able to communicate with politicians. And yet he's like, well, if you have the money, just buy a ticket. And so I think that's a problem. So in response to that, I'd say I think the solution is more accessibility, not less. Sometimes in the good governance framework, we see this emphasis on the politics of insulation. And that's a phrase that Thandika Mkandawire, the late Thandika Mkandawire came up with, where often technocrats, there's this idea we need to put them in like ivory tower and allow them to do their job and not be contaminated by the demands of society. Otherwise, they'll be pulled away from doing the right thing. And actually, I think we need to be really, really skeptical of that and say that the solution to politicians being overly swayed by demands from like certain parts of their constituents is that they need to be more open to engaging and interacting with more of their constituents. So I think more accessibility, not less. So now to turn to the question from Dr. Hayrat at Bayero and asking about Amala politics. So can I ask in the room, can you put your hand up if you've heard of Amala politics? So if you are from Oyo State, you've definitely heard of it. And so this famous figure, Lamidi Adedibu, he's called the Alaafin of Molete. And that's like, Alaafin is the major traditional ruler of Yoruba land and of Oyo, and it's basically saying like he's the leader of his part of Ibadan. He has this like huge authority, and the word Amala politics comes from him giving out Amala and Bagiri, the food that he was giving out to the people who came to his house. But what was interesting was that it was used by Abiola Ajimobi when he came to power as like a banner to summarize the sort of politics that he wanted to fight against. So it's not only me as a scholar identifying a type of politics, but this was an actual argument that was going on. And Ajimobi was saying, I'm going to get rid of Amala politics. It's the end of Amala politics. So it gives us a really great, and I guess I would want to invite students and scholars who are interested in Nigerian politics, maybe that you can do this sort of thing as well, to look at what are the debates already ongoing, and are there wider theoretical issues that certain debates in Nigerian politics can be used as a snapshot or a lens onto, rather than just like taking them as a case study of themselves. I think often they open up wider theoretical debates. And so next, let me turn to the question of Jing Jing from Canada. So let me say two things about this. You said, why look at politics at the level of government rather than households? So first of all, I think it's just inherent in the nature of studying democracy. We're taking it at the level of the polity as a whole. And sometimes that's local government, sometimes that's state government, sometimes that's federal, but we arrive at these pre-existing levels or units of political analysis, and they are the terms through which people make sense of politics and governance. Even in somewhere like Nigeria, where non-state governance is also strong, and we might look at alternative polities at the same time, like markets, motor parks, the Oba. But I think it's just ethnographically, these are really existing polities. People care about their local government, and they care about the state that they're in, and that's so partly it's something about the world that shaped how I studied it. But then I think there are two really interesting other things that come from your question. So a lot of my work, I feel like I'm always in the shadow. Not in the shadow. I'm always having to keep up with Daniel Jordan Smith. He's a very prodigious scholar. He really sets the tone on studying these issues. And his latest book, I think, is going to set the debate for a lot of this, because even its title, Every Household Its Own Government, is so inspiring and it poses so many questions just in the title. But what I haven't read the book because I haven't had the chance, but my understanding is that the claim when we say government in that context is that it's about infrastructure and service provision. It's not actually about governance in the sense conflict resolution, justice, distribution are made at the level of the family. And actually, to some extent, we do see this in Yoruba land. Pre-colonial and colonial Yoruba land, Ibadan, was designed around households, but they weren't necessarily familial households. So you could become head of household either through hereditary routes or through showing virtue and excellence in the field of war or commerce or whatever. And then the household would be about absorbing followers. So people would come out of volition, out of kind of a sense that you're the best bet in town. So I think there are lots of interesting issues around the Ile and I'm sorry I pronounced it probably very badly for any Yoruba speakers, but there are definitely issues about how does household governance shape, for example, the indigenous areas of Ibadan. But yeah, I think even in Smith's using of the word, I don't think he's actually talking about good governance or leadership or rulemaking or kind of pseudo legislative power. I think he's talking about the provision of public goods and infrastructure. Yeah, I think you want to come back on this. Yeah.
You've heard that those were inspired by the fact that each household as a government a response or a way of exiting from the state politics or local politics wasn't responsive to
So first of all, I don't think that accessibility is an ideology. I think like Yoruba progressive cultural nationalism is an ideology. And I think I define accessibility as a value. So there are things we value. We value like integrity, we value honesty, we value strength. And I would say that accessibility conceptually should be understood at that level. It's like a value. You can embody it, but you can have any sort of ideological commitments and still embody the value of accessibility. It just so happens that populists tend to have an affinity for it and be better. But I also wonder if that kind of question about people exiting government or exiting the state, I think it speaks to a larger question that often comes up in the study of Nigerian politics and politics in Africa. And I can only really answer it for the context that I've looked at in Ibadan, for example. But I think there's something really different between a state that is a poor provider of public goods of the sort that we can talk about this, but okay. So I think my sense is that in Ibadan, there is quite a, so for example, one of the places where I was doing work was the roadside markets that had been demolished. So that's one experience of the state. Your shop being knocked down, you've encountered the state in a very real way. And then they were contesting the demolition. But these roadside traders, even if they were selling small thing, most of them were paying some sort of taxes to government. They might not be formalized taxes, but I just think it's a misrepresentation to, at least for urban southwestern Nigeria, to say that it's like, well, the state doesn't provide public goods, and so it's irrelevant of governance. Like, does it actually deliver? And I just want to separate out what I see as being a form of governance and what are, again, like values that all different politicians sometimes aspire to. So the Lagos model, there are debates about how successful that is. A lot of people think it was very successful. You ask a lot of people, who's your favorite Nigerian politician? And they say Babatunde Fashola. He has a reputation and a track record that a lot of other politicians lack. So maybe that's a sign of the success of the Lagos model. And also places where the Lagos model was active, you can really say that like they changed the face of the city. And if you think that's a good thing, if you think there should be more shopping malls, more tarred roads, cinemas, things that are very attractive to foreign investors, then you can say that's a good state. I'm not arguing that they embody something that we should be pursuing or aiming for, but I'm trying to explain why is it that these populist figures who seem to be just such rascals, in the word of Wale Adebanwi, he's like, these are the rogues, these are the rascals, these are not the real Yoruba leaders. You know, they have no claim to like the Yoruba heritage. I'm trying to explain why is it that these people still find some support when the option, the other option is apparently so attractive. And I think that's because we lack the conceptual vocabulary to work out what is appealing about these people who are much more sensitive to ideas of accessibility, transparency in people, and attending to like immediate economic demands. And we tend to, and I think our current conceptual vocabulary means that we're quite blind to what's, I'm trying to highlight some different values that we might use to assess governance. So we might say, yes, Ajamobi, he performed, but was he accessible? No, he wasn't. So let me leave it there. And yes, let's continue to take comments and objections.
All right. Do we have more comments? Do we have more comments and questions? Is there anyone that wants to? We don't have any other any question on the Q&A out here. So do we have any in the hall?
Yes, we do have one question.
Do we turn the
Yes.
We can't see you again.
Yeah.
So I think I missed the better part of the conversation. Yeah, but when you talk about the issue of accessibility and transparency, and you use the instance of many people knowing their local government chairman in Oyo State, for instance, I've been in Oyo State since 2016 when I did my master's. And I can tell you that I've never, other than, okay, elections are approaching, you're seeing posters, I've never had or seen the chairman of the local government. So in most areas in the Oyo State, we do not even know our representative, both at the state and federal level. So, and when we're talking about issues of accessibility, in my opinion, should have an element of communication, getting to see who your leader is and having that communication with your leader. Right now, we're not even seeing our leaders, let alone having conversations with them, right? So in that scenario, I would say that when it comes to governance in Nigeria, the people have no access to who their leaders are. And if you go to like the borderland area, these people do not even have any feeling of governance. The only time they get to hear of anything called government is during elections. And once the elections are over, it's business as usual. So when we talk about accessibility, we need to put it into proper context. If you're living in the urban area, I am happy you said when people talk about accessibility, they can talk about it within the axis of past.
I'm making a claim about, I think people desire and want accessibility. And I think from what you said, you want it. You want communication. You're like, oh, I've never seen my local government chairman, you know, like, where is he? And that's actually something I heard so many times over and over. And actually, if you look at like surveys of British voters or ethnographies of urban Ghana, it's something that people want in a whole range of different contexts. It's not just Nigerians. And yet, you know, political scientists like me, we've been studying this a long time, and yet we have no way of capturing what it is that that popular demand is for. And so that's why trying to really establish this idea of accessibility as a value because it gives us a vocabulary for talking about something that people want, but we don't really know how to theorize. And then I think what you're talking about also as an ethnographic interest, I want to be like, so this guy who's done well, how does he understand governance? Which is why he figures in the book quite a lot, because I thought he was an interesting perspective to hear on that. Yeah, let me leave it there and see if there are any other questions or comments. Or yes, was there?
Okay, you've been off and on, so I didn't really get what you said. But just to buttress what the other speaker before you spoke said, when you talk about accessibility in Nigerian politics, especially in your states, as she has mentioned, you can say that it's relative and maybe context-based. Because if you talk about accessibility, how many of our leaders do we actually have access to? Even talking about the governor of Oyo State, how many people in Ibadan can actually have access to Seyi Makinde? Even our local government chairmen, like she mentioned, we don't even know most of them. In my local government here, I don't even know if we have a chairman. And even the councillors, you don't know them, you don't see them. How many town hall meetings have they had? How many times, if any of them, you cannot even walk up to them if you see their security apparatus. So most of the time, when we talk about accessibility, maybe if you use Fayose as an example, his own case may be unusual. But most of the time, you find out that politicians are not accessible the way you may have interpreted it. Of course, some people will say that because they demolished my store, they didn't listen to me, and so on, so they are not accessible. They are not. Maybe they are not. They don't care about the plight of the masses. But most often, you find out that the leaders are not as accessible as it may look on the surface. So that's the point I just want to make. And also I want to ask you, talking about accessibility, how can your book be accessible to Nigerian readers? Because so I don't know, is there a possibility of maybe liaising with a publisher in Nigeria or something like that so that Nigerian scholars can have access to it? And as I said, I mean, it's a good book of history. Honestly, tracing it from Awezim down to Ajimobi, down to Seyi Makinde. You made mention of Seyi Makinde. You even talked about the role that Florence Ajimobi played in Oyo State. So these are things that I think should not be lost. Somebody was asking about Amala politics. That means she's not aware. So these are the role that Adedibu played in Oyo State. Nobody can, I don't see any godfather again in this era that can beat what Adedibu was to Ibadan. Because when you talk about Amala politics, of course, even talking about accessibility, it was an institution. When he wanted to remove Ladoja, he said, he has done this and those, we are removing him. How can he be the only one that will have access to the security votes? How much was I asking from him? How many percent? I think he was asking for maybe like 40% of the security vote. He said, we are removing him. And Obasanjo wrote, I remember seeing a big banner on the airline saying, Obasanjo said, I cannot help you. Was telling Ladoja then, because Lamidi was, in fact, there was at a point that he raises the hand of those who will contest. So if he does not raise your hand, then you are not likely to even have access to governance at all. So these are things that people should have access to, be able to have it in print to read. It's a book of history. So how can we have access to this book in Nigeria? Thank you, Portia.
I have a question. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. Standing on the existing protocol, there's this common cliche that I often hear, which is politics is a dirty game. I would like to know how your work or this book you have published has been able to change that narrative in the area of your state, talking about their politics and the people's perception about it being dirty. So how has this book been able to convince or even speak about some of the politics that are dirty and how some of the issues are coming together to transform the ideal. Thank you.
Would you like to take the other one?
Yeah, I think more like that.
Is your name?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Oladipo Inyola from University of Nigeria. For some of these issues that we're trying to examine, I would like to know if we're just trying to examine them from the angle of being scholars or to probably find solutions to some of these issues. That's what I like to know. Thank you.
What's your perspective? What do you want?
Okay, for me, I feel like when we are doing research, it's to get a solution to the problems or the issues that we'll find during the course of the research. So I would like to know if some of these studies are based on, okay, let's just research about these things and we found problems concerning these, and are we trying to probably join heads to head and look for what's it called, solutions to some of the problems that we found out during the course of the research.
If it's okay, I'll reply in kind of reverse order just because it's in my mind now. First of all, I just want to give a bit of a defense of if we set out to give solutions too quickly, analysis of the situation and the problems may be inadequate. So I know that often there's this kind of sense of haste of, okay, but what's the solution? And I guess I just want to defend the space. It's worth analyzing political life to make sure that our diagnosis is correct. And that sometimes takes time. And I think that actually the debates around good governance are a really good example of this. So the good governance framework has received a lot of money. So it's a set of solutions that the World Bank, international organizations, the Nigerian government have been spending now at this point about 30 years, probably millions of pounds and dollars to try and solve. And yet in some ways it has not worked. And so if our diagnosis of the problem is using analytical tools and ideas that are inadequate to capture what's going on, then we won't understand why our current solutions aren't working. So one example of that would be if our approach to trying to solve the problem of a lack of transparency is based on a misunderstanding of how people actually make their government transparent, then our solutions won't work. And that's the example, for example, of we put budgets online, we put scorecards online, and they don't necessarily make people think the government is more transparent. They don't lead to voter engagement. They don't lead to a sense of social contract. They don't lead to more people voting, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to do use research sometimes to say, do we have a correct understanding of the problem? And if so, if not, we won't have the correct solution. And then again, in reverse order, so Tahira, politics is a dirty game in Oyo State. First of all, I think people think it's a dirty game in many, many places around the world. It's kind of, what do they say? Like politicians and prostitution, they're the two oldest professions, and the result of the same is both is the same, you just get screwed. Apologies for some innuendo there. So it's not unique to Nigeria, but I think what's interesting in the debate about good governance is this idea that if politics is a dirty game, you need to keep governance separated from it. So this goes back to that idea I talked about of the politics of insulation. And so a lot of people who are supportive of the World Bank and international efforts and the Lagos model efforts for good governance, they think the solution is to try and cut off the technocrats, keep them in a room somewhere and let them just do their job, so that they stay clean. And I guess my work is trying to raise some questions and some skepticism around that. I have a longer account of why I don't think that you can just rely on performance as a form of accountability. Because guess what? The government's not always going to perform. There are there are elements that shape government performance that are outside of the control of the government. So if you're a Nigerian politician, you have all of the most beautiful policies in place, and then the oil price crashes, there's not really much you can do about it. And a lot of states found themselves in this position in around 2013, 2014, 2015, and they weren't able to pay civil servants. And so I think you need to have a patchwork of different forms of accountability, because there are going to be times when you're not able to deliver because of context outside of your control. And if you don't have legitimacy that's based on a range of different forms of accountability, you're going to lose people's buy-in and trust and willingness to cooperate, pay taxes, whatever it is, very, very quickly. So I think thinking about alternative forms of accountability that don't just rely on clean technocratic delivery of public sector, public goods, I think is wise. I guess
How will we get the book?
How do you get the book? I think I'm going to skip to that question because the other ones are more academic and just for my own kind of intellectual predilection. When I was, from the very beginning of my publishing journey, it was really, really important to me to make this book available to Nigerian audiences. And I actually feel quite emotional now because despite my best efforts, it is really, really not very available. So I'm trying to find ways around this. And I think there are structural problems in terms of the incentives that academic publishers in the UK have and the incentives that scholars have. So I was given a lot of advice, which was, if you want to guarantee getting a job, getting the security to keep doing research, getting promotion, you need to go with OUP or CUP. And these are not presses that have the incentive to make their work as widely available as possible. There are other publishers that do that, but I was told they're not as well regarded. So I guess there was a trade-off there. But let me talk a bit about more proactive solutions. So in terms of getting it, so there are two options that the chair suggested that have already been on my mind, and I would really welcome suggestions and assistance on how to make them happen. So one of them is the strongest, I can make a stronger claim to the publisher to have a low-cost African edition if I can put together a list of universities on the African continent that would like to buy it, because this is proof of demand, and then it can go via their South Africa office, and I can make that petition. So if you would like to buy it, or you'd like your university to buy it, and the cost is prohibitive, please come and tell me. I can put your name on a list, and then I can go to them and I can say, look, African universities would like this book, and it's currently unavailable. The second is to try and publish with a local publisher. So again, if anyone has a recommendation or links, someone's put their hand up, so I'll come and talk to you afterwards. Because it's the sort of thing that's very difficult to do remotely and without contacts. So that's something I'd really like to look into. Otherwise, there's also, there might be an online discounted edition that I'm going to look into to try and make the details of available, and then that's 30% off. There are 3 copies downstairs on board the discount, so hopefully they'll get snapped up as well. But I think this is a very, very
Portia?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. We are already running behind schedule. I'm sure we would have loved to continue speaking and talking. So please try to engage with people that are out there in the hall. And I'll also like to maybe try to find a way of contacting you, so we'll be able to discuss about the book after this discussion. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. Yes, you were saying something, Portia?
Also, just if any Nigerian university would like me to do like a Zoom presentation of the book, I'd be very happy to do it. So just send me an email, and my email is on the program. So just feel free.
Okay. All right, that would be nice. That's a good one. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, LSA, for 2023. We really appreciate you. Thank you, Dr. Damilola Agbala-Jobi. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And also Professor Olaniyan that tried to join. Thank you. I'm sure others will have reasons why they didn't join. And thank you, Portia, for the good book. And as you said, the conversation will continue. So I hope you do. Are you doing some other works on Nigeria apart from this?
Yes, they're ongoing.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much. We would like to keep in touch with you. Afterwards, I'll get across to you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful time we had together. Thank you, people in the audience. God bless you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.